It was a calm morning when the sky suddenly darkened. People across the world looked up, seeing strange lights in the sky. Ships, enormous and shining, appeared above the cities. The world held its breath, unsure of what to expect. For the past few years, alien ships had appeared on Earth, but none like this. This was different. The ships were larger than anything humanity had ever seen, their designs unlike anything that could be made by humans. The government scrambled to respond. Military leaders gathered in secret rooms, trying to figure out the best course of action. The news stations buzzed with confusion and fear. Reports said the ships were from the farthest reaches of space, a place humanity had never explored. But no one knew who the aliens were or what they wanted. Every country was preparing for the worst, unsure whether this was an invasion or an invitation. Then, something unexpected happened. A calm, commanding voice echoed through every communication channel worldwide. "People of Earth," the voice began, "I am Queen Alara of the Velrith Empire. I have come with a proposal for your people." The voice was clear and strong. It sent shivers down the spines of everyone who heard it. On the screens in every home, the image of an alien appeared. She was beautiful, tall, with glowing skin, sharp features, and eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. She wore a crown made of shimmering material, a symbol of her authority. "I have come to offer you peace," Queen Alara said. "But there is one condition. A human must marry me. Only through this union can we ensure the survival of your planet and the peace of the galaxy. If you refuse, there will be consequences." The words echoed in the minds of everyone who heard. Them marry an alien queen? How could that be possible? The idea was absurd, yet terrifying. Leaders around the world were in shock, struggling to understand what was happening. The very idea of an alien demanding something like this made no sense. What did she mean by peace? Why a marriage? And why to her? In the halls of power, world leaders scrambled to make sense of the situation. The UN called for an emergency meeting. Some were ready to give in. Others feared that if they didn't act quickly, Earth might be destroyed. The alien queen's power was clear from her message. There was no doubt that her fleet was capable of great destruction. The military was already on high alert, preparing for a possible attack. But what could they do against such advanced technology? No one knew. They had fought wars before, but never against an enemy like this. Among the chaos, one question remained on everyone's mind. Who would be willing to marry this alien queen? Around the world, people discussed her proposal. Some laughed, some cried, but most felt only fear. How could anyone even consider such an offer? Yet as the days passed, people began to wonder, what if this was humanity's only chance at peace? Would someone step forward? Meanwhile, Queen Alara's voice continued to broadcast across the planet. She explained her empire's history, the wars they had fought, and the reason behind her strange request. She claimed that her people were on the brink of collapse, their empire torn apart by years of conflict. Her marriage to a human was not just a symbol of peace. It was the only way to stop a war that had already begun in another part of the galaxy. No one had expected an alien queen to ask for a human marriage. It seemed impossible. Some people suggested that it was a trick, a test to see if humanity would back down in fear. Others argued that it was a terrible mistake to even consider it. Yet others began to wonder if they had any choice. Was this their chance to avoid destruction? A young man named James, who was studying diplomacy, sat in his apartment, watching the broadcast. He had always dreamed of becoming a leader, someone who could make the world a better place. But now, faced with a choice no one could have imagined, James felt lost. He understood the importance of peace. He had studied the history of war, the tragedies that had befallen civilizations too proud to accept peace. But he had never thought that he would have to make a decision like this. James turned off the screen, his mind racing. How could one person, one decision, shape the future of humanity? Across the world, many felt the same way. People debated endlessly, some suggesting that a marriage with the alien queen would lead to an unthinkable future, while others saw it as humanity's only hope. But amidst all the uncertainty, one thing was clear. No one would remain unaffected. As The sun set that evening. The world stood still. No one knew what to do, but everyone knew that their lives had changed forever. No one could have predicted this moment, the arrival of an alien queen who demanded marriage in exchange for peace. And so, the stage was set for the greatest decision humanity would ever face. Would someone step forward to marry Queen Alara? For peace? Or would they face the destruction of everything they had known? The fate of the human race rested on the shoulders of one person, and no one knew yet who that person would be. The days after Queen Alara's announcement were filled with uncertainty. Around the world, people argued and debated, trying to understand what was happening. The queen's demand was both strange and terrifying, and no one knew how to respond. Some called it a joke, others a threat. But there were those who feared that this was the beginning of something far worse. James, who had been following the events closely, sat in his small apartment, his mind spinning out. He had been studying diplomacy for years, hoping to one day make a difference in the world. Now, he was facing a situation that no textbook could prepare him for. The world needed a solution, but what was the right choice? He couldn't ignore the idea that kept repeating in his mind. What if the queen was not lying? What if her people were truly desperate for peace, and this was their only way out? Was there a chance that the human race could step forward and prevent a disaster? James was not a soldier. He had no desire for fame or glory. But deep inside, he felt something stir. He knew that this was the moment when the world needed a voice of reason, a voice willing to take a stand, as he thought about the queen's words. A sudden knock at his door broke his thoughts. James stood up and opened the door to find a tall man in a military uniform standing before him. The man had a stern look on his face, and he held a letter in his hand. "James Bennett?" Man asked. "Yes?" James replied, feeling a nervous knot in his stomach. The soldier handed him the letter, which was sealed with an official mark from the United Nations. James opened it and read quickly. It was an invitation, but not just any invitation. It was an offer from the world's leaders asking him to meet with them. "They want you to speak," the soldier explained. "The UN believes you are the right person to represent humanity. They want you to be the one to speak with Queen Alara." James's heart raced. This was it. He was being asked to make the first real step toward what could be humanity's greatest decision. He was being chosen to talk to an alien queen, to find out the truth behind her proposal. After a moment of silence, James nodded. "I'll do it." A few days later, James found himself on a private plane, flying toward a secure location where the world leaders had gathered. As the plane soared through the sky, James looked out the window, feeling the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. The thoughts of the millions of people who were watching, waiting for answers, filled his mind. When he arrived, he was led into a large conference room. Around the tables sat representatives from every major country on Earth. Their faces were a mix of fear, confusion, and determination. They all looked at James as if he were their last hope. He felt their eyes on him, and for a moment he wondered if he was truly the right person for this task. Could he handle the pressure? Could he make the right choice for everyone? Before he could second-guess himself, the door opened and the leader of the UN stepped forward. He was an older man, his face lined with age and worry, but his eyes were filled with purpose. "James," the leader said, offering a handshake, "we are counting on you. The fate of humanity rests on your ability to represent us. We've made arrangements for you to speak directly with Queen Alara. It's up to you now." James nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand." The leader smiled grimly. "You'll be transported to her ship tomorrow. Remember, this is not just about us, it's about the future of the entire galaxy." The next day, James was taken to a special military transport ship, and as it ascended into the sky, he couldn't help but feel both excitement and dread. The alien queen was waiting for him. He was about to face the most important conversation of his life. When the ship finally docked with the alien fleet, James was escorted by armed guards into a large hall filled with strange alien architecture. The walls were made of a smooth, shimmering material that seemed to change colors as he walked past. The air smelled different, a mix of unfamiliar scents. It's both sweet and sharp. He was led down a long corridor and finally entered a grand chamber. At the far end of the room, sitting on a throne made of the same glowing material, was Queen Alara. She was even more beautiful up close. Her long silver hair shimmered as she moved, and her eyes, deep and wise, seemed to study him with a quiet intensity. Her presence was powerful, yet graceful. James couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he stood before her. "Welcome, human queen," Alara said, her voice calm and regal. "I have been waiting for you." James took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Thank you for allowing me to come. I have many questions." The queen smiled, her eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and understanding. "I'm sure you do. I will answer them all, but first, let me explain why I have asked for you." She motioned for him to sit at a small table beside her throne. As he sat down, she began to speak. "My people are in great danger," she began. "For centuries, we have fought wars that have torn apart our galaxy. I've led my people through these wars, but I cannot do it alone anymore. We are on the edge of collapse. That is why I seek peace with your species. A marriage between you and me would unite our two races. It would bring an end to the fighting and perhaps save both our peoples from destruction." James listened carefully. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, but something didn't add up. "I don't understand," he said. "Why a marriage? Why me?" Queen Alara looked at him steadily. "Because only a human can bring balance to our empire. Because in a way we are not so different. You and I, you seek peace for your people, and I seek peace for mine. This marriage is not just for political gain. It is the only way to end the violence." James thought about her words carefully. There was much he still didn't understand. But one thing was clear. This was not a simple demand. There was a deep struggle within the queen, one that mirrored the struggles of his own people. This was no longer about a marriage. It was about survival. "Give me time to think," James said finally. "This is a decision that cannot be rushed." Queen Alara nodded. "You have as much time as you need. The decision is yours." Left the chamber, James knew that the weight of the decision was far greater than anything he had ever faced. It was not just his future at stake, but the future of humanity. James sat quietly in his small private room aboard the alien ship. The walls around him shimmered with a strange glow, and the air smelled fresh, like a mixture of flowers and something metallic. He couldn't help but be amazed by the sheer beauty of it all. Everything was so different from Earth. The alien architecture was beyond anything he had ever seen. Smooth, glowing surfaces stretched for miles, and the design seemed to have an elegant, almost timeless quality to it. He had been brought here to meet Queen Alara, and as much as he had tried to prepare himself, he found that he was still overwhelmed by the size and the power of the alien fleet. The ship itself was a marvel of advanced technology, unlike anything humanity could imagine. Everything about it felt unfamiliar, yet strangely beautiful. Later that day, James was escorted to another part of the ship, a place that had been specially prepared for their meeting. As he walked through the halls, his guide, a tall, imposing alien soldier, led him to a large chamber. The room was filled with strange but mesmerizing decorations. Walls of shimmering crystal glowed softly, and strange symbols adorned the ceiling. At the far end of the room, seated on a throne-like chair, was Queen Alara. This time, she was dressed in something less formal, but still regala flowing robe that matched the soft glow of the room. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, and her sharp eyes seemed to follow James as he stepped into the room. "Welcome, human," she said in her calm, powerful voice. "I hope your journey was comfortable." James nodded, though he couldn't help but feel a little out of place. He had been trained to think of aliens as otherworldly creatures, dangerous or distant. Yet Queen Alara seemed to break that image. There was a quiet strength in her presence, and something in her eyes made James feel as though she wasn't just an alien queen, but a ruler facing the same struggles his people had faced for centuries. "Thank you for meeting with me, James," said his voice steady, though he still felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "I have many questions." Queen Alara smiled faintly, a look that almost seemed to suggest she had anticipated this. "Of course, ask me anything. I will answer you as honestly as I can." James sat down opposite her. The table between them was made of the same glowing material as everything else on the ship, but it was simple in design. It was clear that Queen Alara valued function as much as beauty. "Why a marriage?" James asked, leaning forward slightly. "Why did you choose this method of peace?" The queen looked at him for a moment, as if considering how to explain. "I understand your confusion. A marriage may seem strange, but it is not just a marriage in the traditional sense. It is a symbol of unity. My people are at war, and we have been for centuries. The conflict has taken everything from us, our resources, our future. The marriage is a way to end that. It is the only way I can unite the different factions within my empire." James processed her words carefully. He had heard her reasoning before, but hearing it from her directly made it seem even more real. The queen wasn't just demanding something strange for the sake of power. She was doing it out of necessity, to prevent her people from falling apart. "And you want to marry a human because?" James asked, unsure if he fully understood. "What does Earth have to do with all of this?" Queen Alara's gaze softened. "Humans are different from the other races. Your species has shown resilience, determination, and a desire for peace despite your history of conflict. You understand the value of unity even when it seems impossible. I believe that a union between us, between your people and mine, can bring a new future. A future of peace." James felt a sense of understanding begin to form. The queen wasn't just seeking a political marriage, as he had initially thought. She truly believed that uniting their two species could create a lasting peace. Still had doubts. There was much he didn't know about the queen's empire and her true intentions. "But what about the rest of your empire?" James asked. "Not everyone may agree with this decision. What if there are factions within your people who don't want peace?" Queen Alara sighed softly. "That is a real concern. There are factions that thrive on war, factions that believe peace is a sign of weakness. But those factions have only brought suffering to our people. My hope is that by choosing a human as my partner, we can create a bond strong enough to silence the critics. Together, we can lead both our people into a new era." Her voice was steady, but James could hear the uncertainty beneath it. It was clear that this marriage was as much a political move as it was a personal one. She was offering peace, but at great personal cost. "How do you know this will work?" James asked, still unsure. "How can you be so sure that a marriage will bring about peace?" Queen Alara's eyes darkened for a moment, and for the first time she seemed vulnerable. "I do not know. But what choice do I have? My people are dying. We are losing everything. I have tried every other method, and none of them have worked. This is my last hope." James could see the weight of her words. It was clear now that Queen Alara wasn't just a leader with a grand plan. She was a leader who had exhausted every other option. The pain in her eyes was real, and for a moment, James felt a connection to her. "I understand," James said, softly, "but this marriage is a big step. For both of our people, it's not just about you and me. It's about everything that comes after." Queen Alara nodded. "I know. That is why I need someone who understands the value of peace, someone who believes in it as much as I do." The conversation fell into silence for a moment as James absorbed everything he had heard. He thought about his own people, Earth, and the war that had shaped their history. He thought about how the human race had fought for peace, sometimes, in the most unexpected ways. Perhaps this was an opportunity for humanity to lead. Not through war, but through understanding. He wasn't sure if he was ready for such a responsibility, but he knew one thing: the future of both their worlds was hanging by a thread. And this marriage, no matter how strange, might be the only way to save it. "Give me time to think," James said at last. "This is not a decision I can make quickly." Queen Alara nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need. But know this: the fate of both our peoples rests on this decision. The longer you wait, the harder it may become." James sat alone in his room, deep in thought. The weight of his decision pressed down on him like a heavy stone. The conversation with Queen Alara had left him with more questions than answers. He had expected to find an alien queen driven by power or conquest, but what he saw instead was a leader desperate for peace. Her words lingered in his mind. The fate of both their peoples rested on this union. He had been given time to think, but the more he thought, the more uncertain he became. Could he really go through with it? Marrying the alien queen was not just a personal decision, it was a decision that would affect the entire human race. The thought of standing before the world, telling them that he would marry an alien, was almost too much to bear as he sat there, staring out the window at the vast, star-filled space outside. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He stood up quickly, his heart racing. He had been expecting the military to contact him, or perhaps the world leaders, but instead, it was a familiar face. "James," said a voice he recognized. It was Captain Lila, a respected officer from Earth's military forces. She had been one of the first to speak in favor of negotiating with the aliens, though she had expressed doubts about the Queen's true intentions. "Can we talk?" Lila asked, her face serious, her eyes tired. She stepped into the room, and the door closed behind her. James nodded, gesturing to the chairs near the window. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Lila took a seat, her hands resting in her lap. "I know this decision has been weighing on you. It's weighing on all of us. I've been in contact with the leadership back on Earth, and things are escalating. The factions opposing the marriage are growing louder. Some are already calling for military action. There are many who believe we can't trust the aliens. They think this is a trap, a way for Queen Alara to take control of Earth." James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, I've heard the same rumors. But I don't think this is a trap. I don't think she wants to conquer us. I think she's as desperate for peace as we are." Lila shook her head. "Not so sure. I've seen what happens when a species is desperate. They make mistakes. We can't afford to be naive about this. If we agree to this marriage, we're giving them everything. And what do we get in return? Peace, maybe, but there's no guarantee." James turned to face her, his eyes intense. "Then what do you suggest we do, Lila? Go to war? Risk everything because we're afraid of the unknown?" "I don't have all the answers, but I believe this is the only way to avoid destruction." "Useless." Expressions softened. "I'm not saying we should go to war, but we need to be careful. The more time we spend with the Queen and her people, the more we learn about their empire, the more we understand the risks. We need to ask ourselves what's really at stake here. What are we willing to give up for peace?" James leaned back in his chair, thinking deeply. The questions Lila asked were ones he had been avoiding. What was at stake? Was it just his future? Or was it something bigger? He had been so focused on the idea of saving humanity that he hadn't fully considered the broader consequences of his actions. "I understand your concerns," James said, his voice calm but firm. "But I believe this marriage is the only way to ensure a lasting peace. If we back out now, the consequences could be catastrophic. Earth could become the target of other alien empires who see us as weak. We've seen it happen before." Lila nodded. "Slowly, you're right. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be cautious. The Queen's empire is struggling, yes, but so is Earth. If we're not careful, we could end up losing everything." There was a long silence between them as they both thought about what had been said. James knew that Lila was right to be cautious, but he also knew that time was running out. The longer they waited, the more the tension between the alien factions would grow, and the harder it would be to maintain peace. Finally, James spoke again, his voice steady. "I don't have all the answers, Lila, but I believe this is the only chance we have. I've seen what the Queen is willing to sacrifice for peace. We don't take this opportunity, I'm afraid we'll regret it." Lila stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "I hope you're right, James. I really do. Just remember that peace is fragile. You can't afford to make any mistakes." James watched her for a moment before standing up himself. He could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him, but he knew what he had to do. His mind had to stand up for peace, even if it meant facing his own fears. The next morning, James was once again escorted to the Queen's chamber. The long walk through the halls of the alien ship gave him time to think. His mind was clear now. The doubts that had clouded his thoughts yesterday had faded. This was the right choice, and he knew it. When he arrived, Queen Alara was waiting. For him, Her regal presence filled the room as she looked at him with a calm, steady gaze. She had not asked him to make a decision so soon, but she knew that time was running out. "James," she said softly, "have you made your choice?" He met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "Yes," he said. "I believe this is the only way to ensure peace for both of our people. I will marry you." The Queen's expression remained unreadable, but there was a brief flicker of relief in her eyes. "Then together, we will change the future." The decision had been made. James had agreed to marry Queen Alara, a choice that would change the future of both their peoples. As the news spread, reactions on Earth were mixed. Some cheered the idea of peace, hoping this marriage would end the threat of war and bring stability. Others, however, saw it as a surrender, a betrayal of humanity's independence. The world had never faced a decision like this before. The weight of it was heavy. James stood in his small room aboard the alien ship, staring out the window at the endless stars. The space outside was quiet, almost peaceful. But inside, his mind was anything but calm. He had made a choice, but the true cost of that choice had yet to be revealed. He wondered what awaited him in the coming days. What would the marriage mean for Earth? What would it mean for the Velrith Empire? He had met with Queen Alara several times since he agreed to the marriage. Each meeting revealed more about her people and the struggles they faced. She wasn't just a ruler seeking power. She was a leader, desperate to save her empire from total destruction. Her empire had been at war for centuries, and peace seemed impossible. Her own people, divided by factions and ancient grudges, had given up hope of ever seeing an end to the fighting. Queen Alara had fought for peace, but the cost had been too high now. She was willing to sacrifice everything, including her own freedom, to create a new future. James had never expected this level of desperation. And though he had agreed to marry her, part of him still didn't fully understand why. But when he saw the pain in her eyes, the weariness that came from years of fighting, he knew it wasn't just about power or control. Queen Alara wanted peace more than anything else. He turned as the door opened, and Lila stepped inside. She was a familiar face in this strange place, someone who had always been there for him, offering advice when he needed it most. Expression was serious, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "James," she said softly, walking over to where he stood. "I wanted to check in on you. I know things have been tense, to say the least." James gave a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Tense is an understatement. Lila crossed her arms, looking at him carefully. "Are you sure about this? I mean, I know you believe it's the right thing to do, but marrying an alien, queen, especially one who's been at war for so long, it's a lot to take on." James sighed and leaned against the window. "I don't know if I'm sure about anything anymore, Lila, but I can't ignore the reality of what's at stake. The Queen has shown me more than just her desire for peace. I've seen the consequences of failure in her eyes. She's desperate, just like we are. The only difference is that her people have already lost so much." Lila nodded, understanding. The weight of his words? "I get it. I do. But I still think you should be careful. There are a lot of unknowns here, and not just with the Queen's intentions. We don't know everything about her empire. What if her people don't accept this marriage? What if factions within her empire try to sabotage it?" James turned to face her. "I've thought about that too. But I believe in this, Lila. I believe this is the only way to stop the cycle of violence. The Queen is willing to sacrifice so much. I have to believe that she's telling the truth, that this will lead to peace." Lila stared at him for a moment, her eyes softening. "I just don't want you to lose yourself in all this. I know you're doing it for the greater good, but sometimes even the best intentions can lead to things we don't expect." James nodded slowly, grateful for her concern. "I won't forget who I am, Lila, I promise." Lila smiled faintly, though there was still worry in her expression. "I hope so." The next day, James was once again escorted to Queen Alara's chambers. The grand hall that led to her room seemed even more imposing than before, the shimmering walls reflecting the uncertainty that filled his heart. The last few days had been a blur of meetings, decisions, and the weight of responsibility that he had never expected to carry. When he entered the queen's chamber, she was waiting for him, standing by the window. Her expression was calm, but there was an air of tension about her. She turned as James stepped forward. "You have made your decision," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "I have," James replied, his voice steady despite the nervousness he felt. "I'll marry you. For peace. For the future." Queen Alara's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. "Thank you, James. You have given me a hope that I thought had been lost forever." James could see the sincerity in her eyes. It was clear that this marriage was not just a political arrangement for her. She was putting everything on the line, trusting that humanity could help her heal her fractured empire. "But we need to act quickly," she continued, her tone becoming more urgent. "My empire is fragile, and the longer we wait, the harder it will be to maintain peace. There are those who will oppose this union, both within my empire and outside of it. We must prepare for the consequences of our decision." James nodded. "I understand. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." Queen Alara took a deep breath, as though preparing herself for the challenges ahead. "You are a brave man, James. I never expected to find someone like you, someone willing to trust me, despite the risks. Together, we will build a new future. A future where our people are united, not divided by war." James felt a sense of purpose settle in his chest. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about both their worlds, their people, and the hope that peace was possible. "We will make it work, Alara," James said. "I believe in this, and I believe in you." As they spoke, a new understanding seemed to pass between them. James knew that their journey was just beginning, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could change the future for both their peoples. The days following James's decision were a whirlwind of activity. Earth's governments were in a state of constant communication, debating the consequences of this unprecedented move. Some saw it as a bold step toward peace, while others feared that humanity was making a dangerous mistake. Even within Queen Alira's empire, the reactions were mixed. Some factions supported the marriage, believing that it could bring about the peace their people desperately needed. Others, however, viewed it as a sign of weakness, a betrayal of their long-held values. James stood in a quiet corner of the ship, looking out at the stars once again. The vastness of space seemed endless, and the silence around him felt almost comforting. But inside, his thoughts were a storm. He had agreed to marry Queen Alara to take the first step toward a new future for both their peoples. But what if this was a mistake? What if peace was just an illusion? His thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching. He turned to see Queen Alara walking toward him, her expression as calm and composed as always. But today there was something different about her. Her eyes were tired, as if the weight of her responsibilities had become too much to bear. She stopped beside him, her gaze following his as they both looked out into the vastness of space. "James, duh," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "I never thought I would be in this position. To ask someone from another world to marry me, to help bring peace. I have fought for so long, and yet I feel as though I have failed my people. I have failed myself." James turned to her, his face softening. "You haven't failed anyone, Alara. You've done everything you could. The peace you seek, it's not easy to find, especially when your people have been at war for so long. But you've shown courage in trying to make it happen." She smiled. Faintly, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I only wish it were enough. I have seen what war can do. I've seen the destruction, the loss of life. And now, I am asking for the one thing that could change everything: peace through a union. With a human." James took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Peace is never easy, Alara, but it's worth fighting for. It's worth whatever sacrifices we have to make. If this marriage is what it takes to stop the fighting, to stop the endless wars, then we must follow through. We must lead by example." Queen Alara nodded slowly. "I hope you're right. I hope that this marriage, this symbol of unity, will be enough to heal the divisions that have torn my people apart." but there are those who will never accept it. There are factions that believe this is a betrayal, a weakness. They will fight us every step of the way. James turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. Then we fight for it. Together. The Queen met his gaze, her eyes steady. For the first time, James saw a flicker of hope in them, hope that he had come to believe in himself. Despite all the challenges they faced, despite the opposition that lay ahead, he knew that their decision could lead to something better, but it would not come without struggle. Later that day, a large meeting was held with the leaders of both Earth and the Velarith Empire. James sat at the front of the room, his hands resting on the table as he listened to the heated debates around him. Earth's representatives were divided, with some arguing in favor of the marriage and others against it. The tension in the room was palpable. James could feel the weight of every word spoken. "I don't trust the Queen," one of the Earth representatives said, his voice sharp. "How can we be sure she's not just using this marriage as a way to manipulate us? We can't risk our future on an alien queen's word." Another leader spoke up. "This isn't just about trust. This is about peace. We've been at war for so long, and the Queen has shown a willingness to end it. If we back out now, we might lose everything." The debate raged on, but James remained quiet, his thoughts drifting back to Queen Alara. She had placed her trust in him, in humanity, and he knew he couldn't let her down. He had made his decision, and he had to see it through. After the meeting, James and Alara met privately, away from the prying eyes of the council. She looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "We're at a crossroads, James," she said softly. "If we go through with this, there will be no turning back. We will face the consequences both for my people and yours. But if we don't, the war will continue. Bloodshed will never end." James stood by the window, his thoughts racing. He had always believed in the power of peace and the hope that a better future was possible. But now, standing on the edge of this moment, he felt the full weight of what was at stake. The future of both their worlds rested on this decision. If they succeeded, they would bring an end to the wars that had torn their peoples apart. If they failed, the consequences would be unimaginable. "I'm ready," he said finally, his voice steady. "I've made my choice, and I won't back down. I believe in this, in us. Together, we can make a difference." Alara smiled, the weight of the world seeming to lift from her shoulders. "Thank you, James. You have no idea how much this means to me." As they stood together, looking out at the stars, James realized that this marriage wasn't just about uniting two worlds. It was about hope, about believing that even in the darkest times, peace could still be achieved. The road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to face it side by side with Queen Alara for the future of both their peoples.